Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my trailer park white trash mobile home kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. There is a local Chinese restaurant where my friends and I meet about once a week for lunch. And while I was waiting for my friends one day, sitting in the lobby, there was a restaurant magazine sitting there. This is a trade journal. It's specific for restaurants. Like there's articles in there on how to buy an ice machine. These are not magazines you normally find on the magazine rack at the grocery store. And I saw some recipes in there, one of which is this date cake that's also flavored with a toffee syrup. And so I asked the maitre d', could I have the magazine? He said, sure, go ahead and take it. And actually, since then, he's been saving these magazines for me. Almost every time I go in there, he has a magazine or two for me. So anyways, today what I want to do, because it's raining outside, it's chilly, perfect day for baking, I want to do this toffee date cake. I've tried it once already. It is absolutely delicious. I adjusted the recipe a little bit because I want more cake. The first time I made it, it was only about an inch thick. I want a good high cake. So that's what I'm going to do today. But first, I want to get into the ingredients that I'm going to be using for making my toffee date cake. For the cake, I'm using 24 Medjool dates. I've pitted these. I'll be chopping them later. And then this is about 12 to 14 ounces total, or 340 to 400 grams. I have 2 1/4 cups, or 532 milliliters water, 1 teaspoon baking soda, 1/3 cup, which is about 5 ounces or 140 grams of butter. That's at room temperature, so it's soft. 1 1/2 cups, 10 ounces, 284 grams granulated sugar. 2 large eggs. My large eggs weigh about 2 ounces or 110 grams each in the shell. And then I have 4 cups, which is 18 ounces, 410 grams of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon baking powder, and then 1/2 teaspoon salt. For my toffee syrup, I'm using 1/2 cup, which is 4 ounces or 112 grams of butter, 2 cups packed. That's why it looks like this. When you pack brown sugar, it should be able to hold its shape when you turn it out. 2 cups packed, or 14 ounces, 400 grams, I prefer to work by weight, of light brown sugar, and then finally 2 cups, 473 milliliters of heavy cream. I'm going to be whipping up more cream later on for garnish. So those are the ingredients I'm using for my toffee date cake. I have brought my water and the soda, baking soda, to a boil. See if I can get that in there without splashing boiling water on my fingers. There we go. Then bring this water back up to a boil and then reduce the heat to low and simmer this for 5 minutes. You do have to watch this closely, or use a really big pan, because this pan is too small. But this ceramic, French-made ceramic pan was given to me by a friend of mine, Maryland, and I love this pan, so I use it a lot. It will boil over if you don't watch it. So that's why I'm saying use a big pan or just stay with it. Okay, it's just starting to come back up to the heat again, so I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this into a stainless steel bowl. I put a stainless steel bowl to the side here. I have run some cold water into the sink. I have the sink halfway filled with cold water. I'll put this in the pan, set the pan in the cold water, and let that cool, because you have to cool this down before you're ready to work with it. It can be warm, you just don't want it hot. Okay, so this is going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next step. I want to combine first my sugar and my butter. I checked the dates, and they are nicely cooled now. So I want to get this cream together. Again, this is why you want to use room temperature butter. Imagine how difficult this would be with cold butter from the refrigerator. I want to get a little knife here, use the back of the knife to scrape this off. This, as you can see, goes very quickly. All right, that's good enough. This doesn't have to be too fancy at this point. Just get those mixed together. Try not to get butter and sugar all over the counter. And then break the eggs into it. And get those mixed in. At this point, you're also working in a little bit of air, because it's those air bubbles that will help provide the leavening that will help the cake to rise. You can do this in a stand mixer or with a hand mixer, and that'll even work in more air. Those little tiny air bubbles will expand when the baking soda starts reacting and creating air, gas. And that's what will help the cake to rise. The baking soda has a little bit of acid in it, usually cream of tartar. You can make your own baking soda with cream of tartar and baking. You can make your own baking powder, rather, by combining baking soda with cream of tartar. And I think there's one other ingredient in there. I forgot what it is. But anyways, the baking powder is going to introduce a little bit of acid into this mix, and the acid will work with the soda in the baking powder to create the gas bubbles. If you already have some air in there, by whipping it up a little bit, that'll help you to get more loft. It'll help the cake to rise a little bit more. Okay, that should be good enough. Now I need to work with my dry ingredients. In another bowl, you want to combine your flour, baking powder, and salt. I'm going to use a whisk to bring these together. All right, and I am in the meantime heating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 177 centigrade. So I have returned to my first bowl. Here are my dates, cooled. I have resisted the temptation to stick my finger in there and see how delicious that is. I've made this enough times that I know how that's going to taste. So that gets mixed together. And then before I put my dry ingredients in there, I want to prepare my springform pan, because once I get the dry and the wet ingredients mixed, I don't want to waste any time, because my baking powder is going to start working right away, creating bubbles. I don't want to lose any of that rising time. Okay, I've prepared my rectangular springform pan. Going to put my flour mixture in here and get this mixed in. You can do all of this with an electric mixer if you want. I'm just so used to working by hand that it's just, I do it without even thinking about it. I have a stand mixer, and I only use it mostly for bread. And when I have to whip cream, I've done whipped cream with a whisk. It's a lot of work. Try whipping egg whites with a whisk. I've done that too. That's a lot of work. Okay, so bring the batter together, scrape the sides of the bowl. This is looking good. Make sure that's well mixed in. No lumps of flour. Okay. And then here is my springform pan. If you know me or you've seen my other videos, you know I like parchment paper. If I ever get famous and have to write my memoirs, I already have the title of my book, The Life of Parchment Paper, Not Confetti. Pretty catchy title, eh? Okay, pour this into your pan. This is a 9 by 13 inch, 2 inches deep baking pan. You can use cake pans if you want, round cake pans. I would use 2 probably for this, because this is going to make a lot of cake. And then just spread this out evenly to fill the bottom. My signal did go off on my oven. My oven has come up to temperature. It's 350 degrees. I'm going to bake this for a total cooking time of about 40 minutes. Starting at about 30, I'll start checking the internal temperature. I like to use a thermometer when I bake. So I know the internal temperature has to come up between 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Do I have that written down in centigrade? No, I don't. So look on the recipe from the website. When you download that, that'll have the conversions in it. I did butter the sides of this pan, by the way, but I didn't bother with the sides and these 2 end sides, rather, and the bottom, because obviously that's covered with parchment paper. So as I said, about 40 minutes. After about 15-18 minutes, I'm going to rotate this around one time, halfway around. In other words, 180 degrees in the oven, so that I know it'll bake evenly. So this is now ready to go into, again, a 350 degree oven. While my cake is baking, I'm going to prepare my toffee syrup. That's the heavy cream. And my brown sugar. Putting that in there carefully so I don't splash anything. And then finally my butter. This needs to be brought up to a boil just to get that brown sugar dissolved. And then once it comes up to a boil, remove it from the heat and just set it aside. This can be reheated as needed later on. Half of this, roughly half of it, is going to go into the cake. I'll show you that. And the other half is going to be used as a garnish afterwards. Here is my cake fresh from the oven. This came up to about 198 degrees inside, so I know this is done. This is a turkey fork. I actually have 2 of these. These are for lifting a big turkey out of a roasting pan. I'm going to use it to pierce this cake, to put the syrup into it. I'm just going to put holes inside of my cake. Like so. Let's see. All right. And then I have my toffee syrup here. So I'm going to give this another stir because the butter does float to the top. This is still hot. I don't know whether you can see the steam rising. I can. So that's good. That means the butter is going to stir in easily. And then normally what I would do when I've made this in the past is I would use a large spoon to pour this syrup over the top. But I'm going to use a baster this time. I think it might give me a little more control. Hopefully I can do this without cracking this glass. And what you want to do is you want to let it go into the holes. Some is going to run down the side, which is okay. But the nice thing about using a baster, if too much pools on the side, I can use the baster to suck it up and get it back onto the cake. The problem with too much collecting on the side is that it'll run down the bottom and out the bottom of the springform pan onto your counter. So I try to avoid that. You can also stick this in there and infuse it a little bit if you want. I actually like that idea better. But I do want some over the top because it'll glaze this top and give the top a nice look. And then again, just go down inside and infuse this. Okay. I am satisfied with that. I'm going to let this cool now a little bit, and then I'll be ready to put this on a platter and then taste it. Meanwhile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to whip up some of my whipping cream, the last of my heavy cream, and use that for garnish. All right, if all goes according to plan here, my pan is cooled down to the point where it's cool enough to handle. So there's my ring off, and then I want to use I'm going to turn this around and do it this way. I think it'll be easier to do it like this. And then slide this gently onto my platter like so. Perfect. Okay, so there's my cake on my platter. Finally, to get rid of this paper, just with a pair of kitchen scissors, cut down close to the edge of that paper to the edge of the cake, rather. That's one side. There is syrup down there, but that's all right. And I don't care that I have syrup on my scissors because these come apart and can be cleaned. Scoot that over just a little bit. And then I want to wipe my plate down. Presentation. Okay, so there is my cake. My next step is to cut a piece. I did whip up some whipping cream. I'm going to put a little bit of whipping cream on top, and then I'm going to spoon more of my toffee syrup over the cream. Going to pick at this and see how it tastes. Yummy good. Okay, let's do the plating. I'm going to cut a little square of cake here. You'll get about 12 to 15 servings out of this cake. By the way, this cake baked for a total of 45 minutes to come up to temperature. Nice. Now, I whipped some cream, as I mentioned, but not to peaks. I don't want it to form peaks. I'll show you what I want. I want it to be running, because I want it to drizzle down the cake. Like so. And then I want to drizzle some syrup over it so it all runs down into a delicious looking syrup in the bottom of the plate. Doesn't that look fantastic? That needs a close-up. Check that out. Doesn't that look absolutely incredible? Last step is to taste this and see how good it tastes, to see if it tastes as good as it looks. Ah, look at that. Oh, that looks so good. Now to taste on. It's nice and moist. I can tell by the way the fork goes through it. What I like about this is it's not overly sweet. I don't like cakes, especially with a lot of frosting on them, that are sickeningly sweet. This has got a mild sweetness to it. It's got that toffee syrup in the bottom of the dish. You can roll your piece of cake in the toffee syrup. That is just incredible. So, excuse me, I gotta go sit and enjoy my dessert. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.